Today I'd like to talk about deaf culture as an axis of difference. I will continue to be interpreting this. Please forgive any mistakes I make. I'm still learning. I've chosen this because of the Queensland floods, watching the interpreter services being used with all public announcements. It's because not the announcements themselves, but because of hearing people's understanding and lack of respect of the need for an interpreter, and seeing the interpreter as being a distraction. Saying, I can't focus on what's being said because this person's waving their arm, rather than understanding that this is a service to assist. I believe this is closely related to race, but it's not race. But race is seen as a way that people are grouped together, identified because of traits, and the deaf clearly have a specific trait. They identify themselves and call themselves deaf with a capital D. I believe if we're looking at the zone of difference, the difference that they have can relate to their job opportunities, the opportunity to clearly communicate with others, needing an interpreter for particular doctor's appointments, the way they see the world, the way they think is different, and that's because of who they are, and partly because they think the way they see, and they use their other senses to be able to understand the world around them, whereas we use our hearing so much to help guide us in what we understand. Today I have Tracy coming in to have a discussion with me of how we can incorporate an understanding of deafness and the deaf community into a school curriculum. When it comes to integrating deaf culture into the classroom, I'm going to divide it into 3 sections. Firstly, we're going to focus on the culture, the community, the understandings and the background behind why and how we can change just little things in the classroom to incorporate a deaf person or a better understanding of the deaf community. Mm-hmm. So to start with, what are a few just movement and physical changes in a room that would need to be made for a deaf person to be incorporated easier?
Okay, well I think the first thing to remember is the front of the classroom. It needs to be clear, the lighting needs to be not too much, but make it enough so you can easily see the face, the lips, the hands. You don't want, the teacher to be standing in front of a window where the deaf student, is forced to stare into glare and can't see the face clearly. Just simple things like when the teacher wants the classroom's attention, instead of, oi, that won't work, flashing lights, as a cue to, pay attention. Simple things as in, touch is very important, to get the deaf person's attention.
And it's an understanding that that's not being rude, that's being respecting and understanding that the deaf person will need you to, if they're not looking, you need to get ready to get them to understand and focus, and
just to get their attention. It's just simple things like that. Things that you may not think of regularly, but the fire alarms, hearing, we hear it. The deaf, they also have their little lights, They'll
have lights for that. Also, the school bell to say that, it's lunchtime or lunchtime's finished. They can't hear those things. That they'll need to look at changing that, incorporating a light system to help with that. Also, within the deaf culture and the way that deaf people communicate. I'd be teaching specifically that students need to understand that firstly, personal space is different, truthfulness is different, that if a student who's deaf is explaining another person, they're going to be honest. They're going to say it, this person looks like, because that's what that person looks like. It's not being rude. We would say, oh, they're maybe a little bigger person, whereas it's just an honesty about, you know, a deaf person is so visual that it needs to be clearly explained. It's a need, not a
politeness.
A politeness, yes. Okay, secondly, we're going to move on to technology. Technology is such an important part of these days. And for instance, mobile phones, great for the deaf because of SMS. They can clearly text backwards and forwards, communicate, no problems the same as us. It gives them the freedom to go out and be able to communicate. Because in the past, if they were out at the shops, they couldn't communicate. Not call up and say, oh, sorry, Mum, I'm late. Because they couldn't pick up a phone and say hi. So while they're out, they have that. But also at home, most would have access to TTY. So that is something I would be teaching to the students to help them understand communication clearer. For those who don't understand, TTY is a relay service that a deaf person to deaf person uses a keyboard. Okay, but what about a deaf to hearing?
That's a little bit more involved. You have a centre set up in Brisbane called ACE, and they have staff there that will relay the conversations. The deaf person be at home, they type their message, that gets sent to the relay officer at ACE. They then voice that to the hearing person. The hearing person will then respond to the relayer, who will then type that message to the deaf person sitting at home. So it goes through several channels.
So as part of the study, I really want students to experience that on both sides. Being able to use the TTY and also being able to pick up the phone and use the relay service to contact a deaf person.
That would be neat.
And I'd love them to be able to go in and see the actual ACE and see what happens. And there's a lot of volunteers within the deaf community who are more than welcome to explain and come in and allow students to use their TTYs to help them understand better what's happening and what's the need there. Also with technology, we've already talked about the lights and the need for different forms of communication. The use of interpreters on the television is also very important, as we saw recently with the floods. And also the cyclone, because the first few days there was an interpreter there. Also, the film crew didn't understand the reason of the interpreter and
put them off screen.
Her body went missing.
What's the point?
So that would also be included, as in students understanding when using technology, how they can use it to assist a deaf person and an interpreter. The third area that we're going to look at incorporating in is history. With the Australian curriculum, history is really important. But we really don't think about the deaf history. The deaf community accept all deaf history, not just
isolated to Australia.
Yes, that's so true. And as part of that, I would allocate every student a particular person, or allow them to choose a particular person in history that has some connection with deaf